Number 7. Hi. I'm freezing in my bed down in Austin, and this is the brand new No Joy by Spanish Love Songs. The LA rock quintet led by Dylan Slocum hit their modest break in 2020 with the release and especially reception of Brave Faces Everyone, a dense, jarring album about all the bad things in the life of a regular. An amazing emo punk effort. It's a work of art I absolutely adore and have made a big part of my last video. Das ist wieder nicht da, oder? In the past 3 years since, the band had released a couple of covers and made a deluxe edition to their magnum opus before eventually returning to the main stage only in May with album single number 1 Haunted. And this one was an instant hitter. It's never easy to follow up your best album, and while I was neither exactly skeptical nor delusional, this celebratory rock song was a promise. It's one of the best of the year. The use of synths had it stick out instantly as a one-of-a-kind track in the Spanish Love Songs discography, teasing a new sound we would get to hear more of on the eventual album. Another thing about No Joy that Haunted introduced with its release was a twisted sense of optimism. The amount of joy on this project, while it is definitely not enough by mental health standards to be called that, ironically exceeds the usual and what I had heard on previous albums. I mean, in comparison to Giant Sings the Blues, this is full on happiness. Reason for that is obviously the instrumental palette all over the record, which I'll come back to speak about, but also the perspective it gives on life. While Brave Faces Everyone was rather an angry cry for help, this is more about taking matters into your own hands, or simply trying to be content. Haunted in particular is an anti-suicide anthem that acknowledges, in whatever context it was written in, that no, life probably cannot be sung praise of, but it can be celebrated regardless. It'll be this bleak forever, but it is a way to live. And this sentiment is expressed on a few other tracks as well, most notably, I believe, the fourth and final single, Marvel, which I was so happy to discover is in fact not a reference to the publishing company, but is actually about wanting to marvel at the end of the world, trying to stay alive up to that point. I mean, this song quite literally calls to stay alive out of spite. That is the closest you'll get to something motivational on here. It has a nice groove to it that works not to overshadow the truly beautiful melody in the hook, supported mainly by a warm and welcoming lead guitar. That 4-single bundle also includes Cleanup Crew, a wonderfully sarcastic piece drenched in full rock instrumentation about life fucking you over. Can't say one bad thing about it, because that's always great. As well as Pendulum, the functioning title track, as not only the title is heavily referenced, but also that entire body of work is very well represented in those 3.5 minutes. I know what they say when I walk in the light, there's no joy in my life. It leans on heavy and slow drums and a humble guitar riff that only enters the mix after a small build-up. No Joy opens on a predominantly melody-focused note with Lifers, which again holds back on the thrashing and deep riffs that help give SLS's music such an edge up to this point in favor of rock and harmony. And I can say this out the gate, there is no routine pain on here. There's no generational loss, so that intro is not too notable on that front, which isn't to say it doesn't work. It's a nice introduction into the experience you are about to endure and has a great lyrical support system as well. It's about driving in company and uses the events following a car crash as a metaphor for the way the two understand each other and respond to each other, emotional intelligence being the big word. We hit the ditch and flip, suddenly my wrist is broken, I ask if you're okay with your head wide open. The quality of the writing all over the album is at all times expressive and intimate. All of it is unapologetic in its sadness, but a glimpse of light gets through that crack. It's just that there's only so deep you can go, such a level of misery you can convey. There's a rock to this bottom. And for a band whose music revolves around and keeps coming back to the same themes over and over again, you'd imagine it'd be difficult to find new openings. And you'd be somewhat right. For some reason, they've yet again managed to make it interesting from scratch. Still, you can see the lyrical approach to unlocking new conclusions about life becoming ever more narrow. Always a specific event in the protagonist's life or something they are observing, then an emotion attached to it and what that emotion means. And usually it's existentialist, pessimistic and suicidal stuff. And what I'm saying is lots of it can be interchanged. But firstly, that is complaining on a high level as new tragedy, but also new ideas find their way into every verse. Secondly, this criticism is also sort of ignorant of the potential power every one of them hold. I mean, you give those tracks time to resonate with you and they sound different in a year's time. Can't forget that in music reviews. Songs like Rapture Chase are very solid performances. The instrumental work is quite bright, and it takes the simple phrase, the pain is everywhere, and repeats it over and over again. It might not be much to an objective eye, but that is emotionally resonant if you've ever felt bad in your life. On Here You Are as well, repetition can be key. Tell Me It Won't Hurt When It Comes, backed by a wall of electrifying guitars. They don't show up as often as I'd expected them to, but we are still talking about this band, so of course it's here. But you might not know them, so what even is this album? Who is it for? I think it's for everyone who's not doing too well, big surprise, and in terms of that, they've done a great job crawling into fucking skin and we can scrape you off the rock at that bottom that I was alluding to earlier. I'm Gonna Miss Everything is about the death of Dylan's brother. If you're in that pit, that song's got you. I can say similar things about Middle of Nine as well. They're very closely linked. The music hitting isn't top priority. It's holding back a bit to give you a chance to really listen to the lyrics, and yes, it's worth it. I'm also very fond of those two songs in particular being connectors in the track list, slowing it down just a bit. Pacing on this project is excellent. That flow isn't interrupted. That too is why you should always have the context of the whole thing when listening to it to really let it hit you, but that's just, you're pretty weird if you don't do that. That really only comes as a burden to one track by the title of Mutable. I full on didn't notice that one going by on my first two listens, and I'd be very open to call this one sort of forgettable. It's not paced well within based on that Julian Baker-esque guitar, and the way it's progressing you expect a breakdown in like 1200 different times, but it never comes. Which is a shame because these guys can do slow songs, my favorite example being their older track Bright Day, but that's all completely besides the point because there is a great example on this very body of work. Exit Bags might just be the most joyless song on this record. Fully acoustic, led by that guitar melody. There is zero joy in that. It conveys a feeling of emptiness despite having love or something you've asked for. And goes back to that whole overwhelming view the world stuff. It's a reflection on time, looking back at the discrepancy between high teen life and present adult misery, trying to understand that transition. And the last verse is so devastating, so sad, it's so completely void of any emotion, it's truly impressive. This is the penultimate No Joy song, and by some sort of definition, a conclusion. And yes, they could have ended it there, they've done it before, but that was years ago, so in true Spanish Love Songs fashion, the outro tries to document the fall of existence. Re-emerging Signs of the Apocalypse is instrumentalized similarly to Haunted, synth-heavy, and sort of celebrative of doom. What can I say? I mean, this was very predictable from the start. When I read that title, I'd practically heard the song, but that doesn't mean it made any mistakes. In fact, it didn't. 5.5 minutes, decent breakdown by No Joy standards, and this is happy. When it gets turned to something really, really optimistic in the second half as all comes raining down, waterfall, ass, riff wall guitar, I swear to God I'm an optimist. Also a nice circle back to the opener as the phrase "don't write yourself out of the equation" gets changed to "we're a part of the equation," and that's really beautiful as this record finishes telling a sort of story, or rather inspiring a new one. Something about fighting your way back into life, managing to be a part of society again, being able to make that difference that you didn't know you were capable of. So, what is there to take away from No Joy? It's another heartfelt rock album that stays true to SLS's core sound while making some small and some significant changes. It is hard, arguably impossible, to find any filler on this. All of the material, whether you think it's good, bears heavy weight, and there's no denying that, which I obviously say as a compliment through and through. All that being said, I have tried to be critical simply because it doesn't come easy. You really have to look for flaws, which is a method of listening that sort of disregards that kind of emotional experience. Yet I can't help but feel what I was doing was more than just meaningless cherry picking. The very few complaints I have on this album unveil a fear I have already had looking upon the band's future. Spanish love songs can be repetitive. Premonitions riding up despite the quality of all of this. It is to be seen in the vocal performances, especially during verses, and on the lyrical front. Instrumentally, I'm not concerned at all. There are 5 really inventive people behind those mics and interfaces, but you can't underestimate these kind of things. It's just that No Joy shines so brightly that this is not something you'd have to think about as a fan at all right now. It's fantastic, and I encourage you to listen to it, especially if life hasn't been kind to you. This is my tracklist ranking, including all song ratings. Notice that the album score is rated independently of these symbols. Special shout out to Quedeca, and that being said, I pronounce No Joy by Spanish Love Songs a 9- out of 10. And when you're feeling like a ghost, would you come haunt me? Please come haunt me.